So I was looking at the NZTA safety competition, and I thought a driving game would be good to do because it's, I guess, NZTA is about driving, and I thought I could look at maybe drunk driving. And so this is a couple of ideas, and I'd like you to try them in class. So I've started off with the template, the driving game template that we were looking at yesterday. You can see I've got the start line and I've got my halfway line, so everything the same as what you did yesterday. And I've also dropped on a couple of sprites of beer bottles. So just to remind you, can go to Google image search, get a beer bottle, and then quite often what you need to do is right click layer from background maybe. That's what I had to do, I don't know why. And then magic wand, select blank space, Control X, make it transparent, and also that bit. Okay, so I did that earlier and dropped a bunch of beer bottles on here. So I was thinking about gameplay here, and I thought, okay, to encourage the safety message, what I could do is just make it that you've got the same old racing game, but as you like hit the beer bottles, you your car becomes less controllable and you become more likely to crash, and then you could do things with car damage and so on. So I thought, what would that look like? And I thought, well, one of the things I can do is look at the car behaviors. So the car behavior, I've got things like max speed, acceleration, deceleration, steer speed, drift recover, friction, and some other stuff. And I thought, okay, maybe what I could do is make it the car just becomes harder to control by changing maybe the steer speed. So I tried that out and it worked, and I'm going to give you a little chance of that yourselves. So obviously it's going to be my car on collision with another object. The sprite should be called beer bottle, shouldn't it? Let's just go and do that. Beer. Good. Right. So car on collision with beer, and the action was I wanted my car, and if you look at the behaviors that are associated with being a car object, I can set the steer speed, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated. You can set a value, but what I wanted to do was just make it a bit less. So every time you hit another beer bottle, it gets worse. So I decided to use a bit of percentages and stuff. If I want to access a property of the car that's already existing, like the steer speed, I'll start off by typing in the name of this sprite that I'm working with, which is the car. And then I know that it's a car object, car behavior I'm looking at, so I'll put a dot, and that fills in all of these things, and car is one of the behaviors, so the car.car, and then dot brings up the various properties, and steer speed is one of them. So this now is saying set the steer speed to the car.car.steer speed, and what I want to do is say actually multiply it by 0.8, so that's 80%, bit of maths, love it, and it will be 80% each time. So every time you hit a beer bottle, you're just going to lose 20% of your steering speed. Let's just see what that looks like. So I'll go for a drive, I hit a beer bottle, which I obviously haven't done anything with yet, and the car has become relatively slow steering, and the more I hit, it's just horrible through this section here. So yeah, you'd have to obviously put beer bottles in the right place. So that was one thing. I was happy with that. That worked. And then another thing I thought was, okay, when perhaps a drunk driver, they're not so accurate in their steering. So this is a bit more complicated. I thought maybe what I should do is have it that as it progresses, as you hit more beer bottles, you get sort of random steering inputs, because I'd noticed when I was looking at this car, I'll go back into the car, I could set simulate control. So I was thinking, okay, maybe I can give it a bit of a wobble on the wheel, and that worked as well, kind of. So I'll show you how that happened. I'm actually going to get rid of the this beer bottle one because it's quite confusing to have them both at the same time, but there's no reason why you can't have both. In fact, I think it'd be very good if there was multiple effects. So get rid of that, and what I decided to have was another variable. Remember, variables contain values that we can use for the game, so often we've used score. Yesterday we had a value of whether we had crossed the finish line, and we had a value for the lap counter, and in this case the value is going to be impairment, how impaired your driving is. And for reasons that will become clear in a moment, I'm going to make the initial value 100. Okay. Now I wanted to do, sometimes you don't want stuff to happen all the time, but you want it to happen a little bit randomly. So I sometimes use this particular thing. I'm going to add a system, compare two values. So you can compare two different things. And one of the things is going to be a random number. So I'm going to put in here random, and it's going to be a random number between 0 and 100. And the second thing I'm going to compare it to is my impairment. And I'm not going to say is equal to, I'm going to say is greater than. So what this is going to do is every 60th of a second, it's going to generate a random number between 0 and 100, and then see if it's more than the impairment value. Now, of course, when impairment is 100, that will never happen, because a random number between 0 and 100 won't be bigger than 100. But as you hit a beer bottle, and let's add that in right now, why not? So car on collision with another object is going to be beer. Done. So as you hit a beer bottle, we're going to change the value. So subtract from impairment 10. Pick a number, 10. Okay, so what I've set up here is every time you hit a beer bottle, you're going to take 10 off that impairment, which is make it a little bit more likely that this thing will come to here, and then the thing that's going to happen here is a bit of steering movement. Now, I did just do this, so I had to play around a bit, and I found this way that works. Of course, with programming, you do all kinds of different things, and some things work, some things don't. I'm not saying this is the right way or the best way, it's just a way that happened to work for me. So you see that instead of clicking here, I've clicked here, and I can add a sub-event now. And I'm going to do that exact same thing, which is going to be system, compare two values, but this time I want it to be randomly either a bit left or a bit right. So random, and I'm going to choose a random value between 0 and 1, and I'm going to say when it's greater than 0.5. Okay, so it's either going to do one or the other. So only if we've got this random number bigger than impairment, then we're going to do this. And again, I'm not clicking here, I'm clicking here. I'm going to add an else. So it's either going to do this one or this one, 50% chance of each. And the thing that I'm going to do is the car, simulate control, steer left. This one, oops, cancel, sorry. This one, the car, simulate control, steer right. So we're going to get a bit of wobbly driving, and this is going to happen every 60th of a second. Is going to make this choice, and the lower the impairment value, the more likely this is to happen. Ooh, let's see if that works. So I would drive off, no wobble, no wobble, and then I hit the bottle. I've hit the bottle twice now. Is that actually working? Yeah, I've got a bit of wobble going on, and it becomes a little bit more apparent as you're driving along. It actually does become a little bit uncontrollable. You can kind of see it's a bit, which I think it is the impairment that I was kind of looking for. The problem that I've noticed, you can see it wobbling there. The problem that I've noticed is that if you keep hitting beer bottles, it gets to a point eventually where it's pretty much happening every time, and the wobble almost cancels out. So it actually becomes easier to drive the more beer bottles you drink, which is not the message we want. So you'd need to find a way to fix that. I'm not quite sure. You'd perhaps set a minimum value for impairment and so on. That's about it, I thought, for the impairment. Just one last thing I thought might be worth mentioning is going into the layout for the yeah, I'm actually not going to bother with that. That's great. So have a go at that. Try and refine those ideas, maybe make them better. There's other things you can do. You could play around with the drift recover. The friction is not that useful. It's how much it sticks to the walls when you hit them. But you could change the acceleration to make it much harder. So as you hit the accelerator, it there's all kinds of things that you could have as you hit beer bottles, and maybe you could have different things that have different effects. Beer bottles or maybe wine glasses. You just try and make it a driving game, or you could even have these moving up and down in a sign behaviour more and more. That would be cool, wouldn't it? So as you drink more, these become easier to hit as well because they perhaps move around. I don't know. Use your imagination. Try and make this an anti-drunk driving game.